Hey guys, how you doing? Nathan Adlin here with
Andrei Smirnov.
and we have a very interesting TFL Today video coming at you live, and it is about our top all-wheel drive cars ranked. Now, first of all, winter's coming. Winter is, believe it or not, I know you guys have all been through like hot summers and everything, but it's really not that far away. Winter's on its way, and because of that, we are Coloradans, and as such, we really do know winter cars. So we have a special way of testing out vehicles, and that special test is known as Goldmine Hill, and Andre is going to explain that.
Yes, Goldmine Hill, we've been using it for years.
Yep.
Maybe 5 years we've been going to the same trail, and it has 3 parts to it. First is a steep incline with some rocks.
Right.
And most crossovers and cars can do this.
Yep.
And we're gonna get more in detail about this.
Yes, we are.
Then the challenge comes. Stage 2 is a 90-degree turn, but it's off camber, so you have to go to the left and also articulation a little bit.
Actually, several feet between
Yeah.
the bottom and the top of that thing.
And we stop before we make the turn to
Yes.
make it as difficult as possible. And finally, the third stage is a big, really narrow path, a lot of articulation, a big hole, and it gets deeper and deeper as the time goes on.
Yeah, that's the one problem, is that we're trying to be consistent with it, but unfortunately, Mother Nature wears away. Now, one of the things we maintain by taking vehicles into and onto Goldmine Hill is that if it does well on Goldmine Hill, chances are it's going to do really well in the snow. And we've proven that time and time again because, once again, Coloradans, and we tend to take most of these vehicles into the snow at some point in time. And it's proven true. And here's the best part about all of this. We're able to ascertain good ground clearance, tire, and all-wheel drive systems, even power plants and transmissions. All of that we can actually figure out as we're going up the hill. So without any further delay, let's get to this is a top 10, but the first group, yeah, it's an unusual split. The first group are 6 cars. These are the vehicles we've recently driven. And by the way, when we say cars, we actually mean crossovers, which are cars. All right,
These are 2017s or 2018s.
That is correct. So let's start on the first 6 that struggled, and we'll explain why and what type of all-wheel drive systems they have. So let's start off with number 6, which is the Fiat 500X.
All-wheel drive.
All-wheel drive.
Yes.
Now, the reason we decided to take this vehicle up the Goldmine Hill was because we actually tried it earlier, about a year earlier, and we did it with the front-wheel drive one. That vehicle didn't do very well, and what we wanted to do was show you guys why all-wheel drive works better than front-wheel drive, and sure enough, it made it up much higher without much of a problem.
Because a lot of you say, my Civic can do it, right?
Yeah.
Because on camera, in a 2-dimensional view on video, the road doesn't look that steep.
Yeah.
But as soon as we bring people up there and they go, okay, it is steep. But nonetheless, the 500X all-wheel drive went much further
Yes, it did.
than the front-wheel drive counterpart.
That's correct. Now, keep in mind, the all-wheel drive system in this vehicle is nearly identical to the all-wheel drive system in the Jeep Renegade. They're cousins. And this vehicle had a 9-speed automatic transmission feeding the front wheels, and then when it detected slip, it would add power to the rear wheels. However, it is not a true 4-wheel drive system. You really can't do too many selections with it, and there's no center diff you can lock or rear diff you can lock or anything else like that. And also the tires. None of those things were up to snuff to really get to the top of the hill, but it did make it up the first obstacle without any major issues. So that is the Fiat 500X. Now let's move on to number 5 because it's an odd one. Because I've driven the same vehicle in Moab and it did really well.
It's the brand new 2017, and it's been updated with a special edition Toyota RAV4 all-wheel drive system. And this was a limited model, this particular one. So the top of the line one, and we've taken a lot of RAV4s in all kinds of conditions and all trails above Boulder, Colorado, and it didn't do so well, this particular one.
We're still struggling to figure this out because it's still the same setup, basically. I think some of it has to do with tire. They were not very beefy, and it had a really hard time grabbing and making traction. And the bottom line is that the Toyota RAV4 really struggled going up the hill. It's a 6-speed automatic transmission setup, and it's now actually one of the older vehicles in its, encapsulated in
in this segment.
In the segment. That's the word I'm turning. Yeah, thank you.
By the way, do you guys like the 3-dimensional image?
Yes.
Sometimes it pops up.
Yeah, Roman is doing 3D just for you guys. 3D. Okay.
But the RAV4, I think.
no expense here.
But by the way, the RAV4, I think one of the issues or challenges it has, it's also ground clearance.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them, especially the higher end models like the Limited, has those running boards that run on the side. and it's really kind of decreases your, your
Breakover.
Yeah, breakover angle and ground clearance.
All right, let's move on to number 4, which is the Dodge Durango. Roman took this up, Goldmine Hill. Now, this was a rear drive, was it the
Biased.
Rear drive biased vehicle, and it had an 8-speed automatic transmission.
That was a V6, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's the Pentastar V6. Now, the power wasn't all that bad, but Roman had a tough time with ground clearance and, once again, tires. This is the bottom line. I think you're starting to get this, guys. Tires, that makes the vehicle. Because if you had snow tires and you were in the snow, you'd do a lot better than having all-season tires, obviously.
And we test the tires that manufacturer provides.
That's exactly
That's
it.
the way you buy them. So,
Yeah.
But obviously, we recommend always, if you live in a snowy climate or other climates where you require more traction, get the appropriate tire for your climate.
Now, speaking of that, one car company is consistent with putting snow tires on their vehicles during wintertime when we test them. Only one company has been doing this, and that's Mazda. However, when we had the Mazda CX-5 recently up on Goldmine Hill, one of the issues we had was tire, but it wasn't because of snow, it was a dry test. The problem was the tires just didn't have enough bite. The all-wheel drive system, I thought, worked pretty well. And yes, I did play between using the traction control and not using it, and it still struggled a little bit on the second obstacle. But the bottom line is that that's a vehicle that needs the right tires for the right terrain.
And the CX-5 is an example of newer all-wheel drive systems, and they're becoming smarter and smarter by the year.
Oh, yeah.
So, and this is a predictive system also, where it's, it monitors so many conditions. The angle of the steering, what the incline is, the
Ambient temperature, exactly.
all kinds of conditions, and it tries to predict that.
And we had an opportunity to take one of those out in the snow when they just came out with that system, and
Right.
it did really well. It actually was best out of all the ones it was competing against. All right, let's move on to our number 2, which and these are the vehicles that struggled, and it's the Lexus NX Hybrid.
Yeah, and this is a unique setup, right?
Really unique.
Because, you would think it would be similar to RAV4, but it is a hybrid. So the front wheels are driven by the gasoline engine.
That's correct.
But the rears are not.
They're driven by an electric power plant, and as such, I thought you'd get better traction out of them because they would be able to really calculate their own thing and have a lot of torque because it's electric. Didn't quite happen that way. Unfortunately, that was a vehicle that just did not do particularly well on the trail.
Sometimes some vehicles, what happens is you get to an obstacle, maybe it's on an incline and you're touching a little branch or a rock or something, and the vehicle just says, I give up.
Yeah.
So sometimes certain conditions tell the vehicle, I want to protect myself, I'm not going to go further.
And that would be number 1 on the list of the vehicles that struggled. That was the Nissan Pathfinder, and that is precisely what it did to us. It did okay on loose dirt. It did just fine on that. But once we got up to the final obstacle, it would not, even though it had some traction, it absolutely stopped. And the reason why is because it has a way of disconnecting its transmission from its power delivery to the wheels. And it does that because it's a CVT and it's trying to save itself from being cooked.
Yeah, overheating issues. I mean, the computer is looking at all the parameters
Right.
within itself and the external parameters.
I had my foot to the floor. And, what should have happened where the wheels should have spun and got me up the hill, but it didn't happen. All right, let's get to our Q&A real quick before we get to do we have any questions?
Do we have any questions coming in?
Yeah, people want to know what does rear wheel bias and front wheel bias mean?
Okay, so let's say you have a BMW X3, which is going to be on our list coming up in a minute. That is a front engine vehicle with rear drive. It's similar to the regular 3 Series, right? Mm-hmm. And when it's rear bias, that means that initially that's how it was built, as a rear drive car.
And it's for performance, right?
Right.
For, you want to get the tail out a little bit, get the sporty character of the car.
So the front wheels kick in as extra traction. Now, if you reverse that on a vehicle that's front wheel drive, like the Toyota RAV4, front wheels are spinning, and then when they lose traction, they sends power to the rear wheels in order to get out of a sticky situation. So front wheel drive bias is basically a front wheel drive setup with that addition. Rear drive, exactly the opposite.
People want to know where is Subaru on this list?
Well, we haven't had a chance to drive any Subarus for 2017.
No, or 16.
Or 16.
Or 15.
On Gold Hill, yeah, we have. But I can tell you this. I still feel that, and I recently drove just on my own, and my neighbors was at the...
How could you, Nathan? Is that a Forester?
Forester. I used to have one too. This is the funniest part. And it's great. It's fantastic. But it also has a CVT as an option. I couldn't stand that transmission. But it's a really good snow vehicle. All of them are good and they're safe cars.
My wife currently drives a 2015 Outback, and if I can talk her into it, maybe we can sneak it up there.
Yeah, that would be great to take
How
it
do you
up
know
there.
they're good if we haven't tested them, Nathan?
We have tested them in the past, and they did great. So
No, that's not right. No,
Yep.
we didn't. No.
We didn't?
Well, the Outback,
They did not
remember
do
the
so great.
cliffhanger?
Yeah.
It got stuck. It did the similar
But
thing
that was
the
a clip- yeah.
the Pathfinder did.
That's true, but that was also on a really difficult terrain.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
was.
really difficult terrain. So there's that. But the point is that on snow, at least, they've done really well in the past. Okay, let's move on.
I got a question for Andre.
Okay.
When are we going to take, I'm going to say Dodgezilla, with quotes, Rusty Boy and Big Green up Cliffhanger, or Goldmine Hill?
I'd love to take him up Cliffhanger.
Yes,
Oh,
I would love to do it, and we need Tommy, we need Mr. Truck, Ken Sunling, and we need us to all be free at the same day, and we want to do it within the next week or two. So stay tuned for that.
yeah, and hopefully they're not pissing
Well,
gas
I
like
think
that.
it's going to go up Goldmine Hill, not Cliffhanger, because Tommy's truck is not.
Tommy's
Cliffhanger
truck's
way.
really not up to, no.
I still want to take him on Cliffhanger, but first we're going to do Goldmine Hill and see. Actually, it's raining up there now, so the conditions are getting very challenging, and the snow might come very soon.
It's entirely possible we could have snow by next week.
By the way, we do have a bonus on the struggle.
Oh, yeah.
We did have our Baja Boxster project, which we thought for some reason that we could take a Boxster, lift it up, give it like big meaty tires, and take it down to Baja. And it didn't quite work out that way.
No, it didn't. Really, what the guys tried to do is basically take a stock height Boxster and try to drive up there, and I think they made it 4 feet.
The problem is gearing. So in a lot of these cases, you want to slowly crawl up the hill.
Yeah.
And as soon as you, and by the way, I do have my handy
He's got his toy. Look,
Torsen
guys.
differential, guys. Look at this.
Yeah,
It's 3D printed.
he made it himself.
So basically, I mean, you could show a lot of things. You can show the gear ratio because when you basically move, this is the engine power, right? See how I move this often, a lot of revolutions go on the
That's where
engine,
the drive shaft goes. Why don't you show where the drive shaft
Drive shaft would come out.
drive shaft here. But you see how slowly the whole diff is moving. So that's the gear ratio. And then it has a locking system where if you provide resistance on one
The
side,
wheel is, right?
yeah, these are the two wheels on these sides. See, you get extra action and you get the locking. And then it'll provide extra
Andre, what does
resistance.
that mean you get extra action? That sounds like something you got at Hooters this weekend.
I did not get extra action at Hooters, but you get more traction if you provide resistance or less resistance on one side. And this is one way to see this with a Torsen differential.
These all-wheel drive systems are different in many ways.
I just broke it.
He dro-
You broke your horse and death.
he broke his toy. Hey, let's move on to the top 4.
Sorry.
Literally,
it's okay.
Literally this year, we only had 4 vehicles that were either proficient in getting up the hill or showed proficiency going up the hill. And we'll explain that right now with number 4, which is the Volvo V90 Cross Country. That vehicle had an excellent traction system. There was no reason, other than one, why it shouldn't make it up the third obstacle. We actually drove up the third obstacle. It would have definitely gone up and over the crest. But then we discovered that we had absolutely no ground clearance. It's a really long car.
And it's a very sexy car as well.
Yes, it's sexy. It's good for sexy time.
By the way, all these videos are on the TFL Car channel.
Yes, they
so
are.
if you're curious about any of this in more detail.
The Volvo V90 Cross Country really showed us what good traction can do. The tires were great. Traction was great. It had no major issues. Even going around the corner, despite its length, it's almost as long as the Raptor. But because we didn't want to grind the bottom of it on the hill and mess
We
it
don't
up.
want to damage.
That was an expensive car. We didn't want to destroy it. We opted to stop. However, if you watch the video, you'll clearly see it was ready to go up and over the hill. In fact, look for that video because Tommy was there, and it was actually one of my favorite videos for going up Goldmine Hill. Let's move on.
Yeah, and real quick, this car, the
yeah.
Volvo V90, and the next car on the list, which is the 2018 VW Atlas, the brand new SUV crossover from Volkswagen, which is the largest crossover they've ever done.
Yep.
share some technologies as far as what used to be called the Heldex all-wheel drive system, which uses clutches.
Right.
It doesn't use gearing like this. It actually, sorry, I lost one wheel. But it actually uses clutches in this area.
Right.
In the center. Also called Borg-Warner all-wheel drive system. So they do share some components or design features. And the Atlas did really well. You drove it all the way over the third obstacle.
It had no problem. It was surprising because at the time we went up against the Pathfinder, and I expected them to have similar results with maybe the Pathfinder struggling a little. I was completely wrong. The Atlas did it no problem. Even though the tires were not suited for off-roading, I distinctly remember that they were street-biased tires by far. Still, it managed to go up and over. Good ground clearance for a vehicle like that. And frankly speaking, that vehicle itself has been extremely impressive coming from Volkswagen.
People are asking, what's the definition between all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive? That being, of course, the fact that there is a differential in a four-wheel drive vehicle, and you usually don't have one in an all-wheel drive vehicle.
You mean the transfer case?
Transfer case, yeah.
Transfer case.
Transfer case. Yeah, that's kind of the classic definition.
Yeah, the classic definition is if you look at the truck or like a Jeep Wrangler, it actually has a transfer case in the center of the vehicle that provides additional gearing reduction. So
Right.
you can actually throw it in low
Yep.
and actually use the engine's power more effectively because the gearing just works for you.
That's correct. Most all-wheel drive cars that are out there are either completely autonomous, they do their own thing and fire up your all-wheel drive system for you, figuring out where the traction and power needs to go, or you have one or two settings that you, or a couple settings that you can use in order to sort of play with it. Now, some of these all-wheel drive vehicles do have a locking diff, but we'll get to that in a minute because that really comes down to number one.
Yeah, none of these vehicles so far provided locking differentials.
That is correct.
Or transfer cases.
Well,
for that
technically
matter.
speaking, the Toyota RAV4 does have a button you can push for slow speeds,
Front and back.
front
right?
and back,
Yeah.
right, but it's not the same thing. All right, let's move on
So,
to...
okay, number 2 on our best list.
Now, this is a vehicle that blew my mind.
It
because
surprised me.
I did not expect it to make it up the second obstacle as quickly as it did, and it would have, I guarantee you, gone up the third obstacle had we been willing to break the lower valance in the front. And that's the BMW X3. Now, it was technically last year's model.
Yes.
However, you know,
It was a 2017
It says
before
2017
they refreshed
before the-
or a new gen came out.
so it is a rear drive, rear bias vehicle that has basically a small drive shaft that goes up to the front diff that locks up the front end, or at least gets the front end to partially lock to allow you to go around obstacles. And here's the cool part. Not only does it work very well, apparently, in the dirt and, you know, in some actually challenging conditions, it works really good when you're driving on the road because as you're going around corners, it'll actually retard the amount of power going to the inside wheels as you're going around the corner and then
Overdrive?
increase. Yeah, and then increase. So it's vectoring the torque and it works really, really well.
And we all know that BMWs are excellent performance vehicles on pavement.
They tend to be.
But what surprised me was, first of all, I think we had like 19-inch rims.
Yep.
You know, with not a lot of tire, which is usually a bad thing.
That's correct.
And we were so careful, very, very careful on this climb.
And it ate it up, man. And it was doing it with street biased tires.
It lifted the tire, just went up the second obstacle, no problem.
Yeah, really surprising vehicle. Would love to try getting it on the third obstacle in the future if we can manage not to break it, which we'll see. But one vehicle that absolutely crushed everything and that we would love to take up, Cliffhanger 2.0, but we know we'll break it if we do, and that's the Land Rover Discovery, our number one choice.
Yeah, and this is kind of the definition of high-tech all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive system because it has all of the elements.
Yep.
It has a low range, so technically there is a four-wheel drive system. It has lockers,
Yep.
center lock to appropriate power front, back, and rear lock.
And a rear locker. And this is a vehicle that, look, guys, it doesn't have a frame. It's based on a unit body. It doesn't have solid axles. It has independent front and rear suspension. It is basically like a crossover. However, it is the most off-road capable of any of these. Perhaps, maybe the Jeep Grand Cherokee Trailhawk, which is technically in that same vein. Because,
Realm, yeah.
that would probably compete with it. But the bottom line is that this thing just absolutely ate up that course. It laughed at us.
And by that we mean, ate up a course sounds like dramatic, but in this case it's actually the reverse. When a car struggles, you usually have wheel spin and rocks flying.
You're worried about sliding backwards and
sliding
everything else.
backwards, you're sweating and you're nervous and you're stressed out. The reverse happens in the Discovery.
That's right.
It's easy.
It is, especially with the diesel engine it came with. That 3-liter diesel, by the way, we're expecting something similar to that to go into the new Ford F-150 diesel, and there's a video out on that with us towing with that Discovery. Anyway, we do have a bonus.
Any questions before we
get to the bonus?
To the bonus?
People are asking about the Kia Sportage because it has a locking differential. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a similar thing to the Toyota where you can actually hit a button and at
Front and back?
Yeah, and you at very low speeds, you're basically splitting the torque 50-50 front and rear to get out of really sticky situations, but it doesn't work at high speed.
And this is where the difference comes from. Some manufacturers let the driver sort of control more aspects of the system, like
Yeah.
this little button that you push, or sometimes you can disable traction control by pushing another button.
Right.
And other manufacturers say, no, we'll take care of all that for you. We'll decide when the torque needs to go.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Here and there, and we'll do it for you.
I think that's really what the selection is all about nowadays. You can actually go and find the one that really appeals to you because they're, at least for now, are pretty interesting selections. In the future, we eventually will have all-wheel drive electric vehicles that we'll be taking up that trail, and I am very excited about
One
that.
of our viewers wants to know what luxury brand do you guys think makes the best and most true off-roader?
That's a really
Luxury
good
brand, I think it was number 1 on our list.
Yeah, Land Rover,
Land
Range
Rover,
Rover.
Range Rover.
G-Wagon.
Yeah,
I've never driven it off-road.
Neither
yes,
have I.
it's a military vehicle with 3 locking diffs and costs $250,000 with a V12, but I've never tested it.
they're painfully ridiculous. But at the same time, if you're in Los Angeles and, you get a light breeze, you'll be happy to know that you can
can
drive
go to
one of them.
Starbucks,
Go to
no
Starbucks and
How
everything.
about, how about Lexus with their version of the
Yeah,
Land Cruiser?
the problem with the Lexus, all their versions of their other vehicles is that they tend to take a lot of the off-roading ability out by adding schmaltz, by adding steps that screw up your breakover angle, and then a front end skirt that just drops way down that screws up your approach angle, and more crap off the back that screws up your departure angle. Bottom line, Toyotas are better than Lexus in terms of off-road vehicles.
Oh my
in
gosh, the
series.
4Runner is one of the premier off-roaders out there.
Land Cruiser.
And Land
Holy
Cruiser
cow.
and the LX, but as soon as you get to the Land Cruiser, you have to pay $80,000 or more. LX costs $100,000,
Yeah.
and you have 21-inch rims that are not useful off-road at all.
Nearly useless off-road.
Yes.
Speaking of useless off-road,
Oh.
comes our bonus. And I hate it. And I'm thrilled to tell you guys that we're putting out more videos about how much money we're sinking into it. And that is our Pontiac Aztec, or as I like to call it, our Pontiac Prozac.
Okay.
The Pontiac recently suffered from a bit of a failure. We'll talk about that in the future, so stay tuned. It's coming. But we actually did take it up Goldmine Hill, and it did okay.
I remember the nose plowing, the third obstacle.
Oh,
You
I
were
plowed the crap out
burning
of it.
rubber. It was exciting, but
But it stopped, and what happened was the rear system, which is very complex, especially considering
Versatrack.
Versatrack, 3 clutches in it, and all that other stuff. It overheated, and there's a little warning light saying it's overheating, which
Yeah,
basically means that you no longer have all-wheel drive, which is that sucks. So I had to back off the hill and not go up. I'm pretty sure that if I hit it at high speed, I could easily crash up it.
you could have launched it.
I wanted to so badly. So yeah, and recently we've been putting some money into the
It
vehicle.
leaked some fluid, and we're trying to figure out exactly what it leaked.
So last question before we wrap this up.
Last question before we wrap it up.
People know what Audi is that and what are we doing with it?
That's a really good question. Guys, this is a vehicle we recently took to the track and we did a fun 0 to 60 run. And one of the reasons why we did it is
What is it?
It is a 2017 Audi A4. This is our first A4. We've had S4s before, but we've never had an A4. So that's it. And it has the appearance package, I think.
S-Line.
Yeah, the S-Line.
And it's got a 2-liter turbo and quattro system.
Uh-huh.
And we don't have actually a recent quattro system that we've tested on Goldmine Hill,
That is true.
but we want to.
Yeah, and one quick note about quattro systems. Just like other all-wheel drive systems, there's more than one version of it that exists, a lot more than one.
And they have a predictive system in the new Q5 and an SQ5. So we want to get one of those.
Oh, we do, because we'd take a Q5 up Gold Hill, without
Yes,
a doubt.
absolutely.
But this is too low to take up Gold Hill. At least Roman's around and he won't let me do it. All right, guys, I think that's going to take care of it for today. Hey, we got a lot of stuff coming up around the corner, including car shows and more
Where are
cars
you guys
testing.
going tomorrow?
Yes. Andre, tell them where we're going.
We're going to Vegas, and there's a Chevrolet event actually together with Polaris. We're going to be driving a Tahoe, and we're going to be driving Razors.
In Las Vegas. And it's supposed to only be about 100 degrees and change, so I think we'll be okay.
It's cooling down.
All right, guys. Hey, if you have any other questions, don't forget to put them down there, and this will eventually turn into a regular video, and we'll come back and check on those questions and try to answer a few.
Yep.
We'll see you later.
Go Broncos.